I'm Little T, and now we're going to be baking. Starting over. Hi, welcome back to the Big B and Little T channel. I'm Tina, also known as Little T, and today I'm going to be making scones. I make scones every day when we work together in our cafe, 611 Bakehouse, and I'm making these so I can upload them for customers to use if they would like to make them as well. In the summer, we will be leaving to go on to something else in Kentucky, and I will no longer be making them here. We have just a basic mix that we use for scones, and we make that in bulk, and then we use them to make whatever flavor we want. Today we'll be making chocolate chip. That's one of our customers' favorites. But there's all sorts of varieties you can make, like cranberry orange, lemon poppy seed, apple cinnamon. Anything you can think of can really be tasty when it's put inside a scone. So let's get started on making these together, and we'll see how they turn out. Okay, so our recipe calls for 4 cups of flour, half a cup of sugar, 1½ teaspoons salt, 1½ tablespoons baking powder, and 1 stick of butter. So what we do is, actually what Sierra does, she helps me on Mondays, she gets a whole batch of that made in here. To fill up this entire container takes 4 recipes of what I just told you. And if you're actually going to make just 1 batch of scones, I would cut that recipe in half. So that's what I'm going to show you right here. We're going to take 2 cups of flour, and then we're going to take a 1/4 cup of sugar, and we'll take 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt, and we'll take 3/4 of a tablespoon of baking powder. We're just going to mix the dry ingredients up. And then we will add the butter. I use unsalted butter, not butter, butter. And we're going to use half a stick for 1 recipe of scones. If I were to make these vegan, I would use a plant-based butter. Country Crock has stick butter, and I would just use that instead. So we are going to cut our butter in half. And you want the butter to be cold. And then what I do, just to make it a little bit easier to blend it in, I will take my dough scraper and I will just cut it into a little bit smaller chunks so that when I use my pastry blender, it's not starting with huge chunks of butter. So we got those all in a nice dice. Then I'm going to take my pastry blender. If you don't have a pastry blender, you can use 2 knives and go kind of like this, side to side, or a fork, or you can even put your hands in there and get your hands all nice and messy. I just like the pastry blender, and it will get some butter hung up on it, and you can go like that. Be careful if yours is a new pastry blender, because these could be really sharp on the bottom. This one is actually not too sharp because we've had it for quite some time. And you're just going to work that butter in as if you were making like a pie crust or biscuits, so that the butter chunks will be small, about pea size. It'll take just a little bit of elbow grease, and I just like to turn the bowl until it's all nice and blended in. and I'll just take those little extra pieces of butter that stick here. And then you can see from this that the butter is now very small. If you find any big chunks in there, if you just put your hands in it like this, you can always just smash it together with your fingers until it's like this piece is a little bit bigger, and just rub it until it gets a little bit smaller. Okay, so there we have our scone mix. If you were to make a whole batch, I would use the double recipe, and then we just keep this in the fridge and pull it out whenever we're making more scones. It's very handy to have it on hand when you're going to make scones pretty frequently. Okay. Now, like I said, these will be chocolate chip scones. So in the recipe, if we were to be using this mix, I would need 1 1/4 cups of mini chips. Now we just used Hershey's, or you can find them Nestle's, wherever you can find some mini chips. If you're making them vegan, then you would choose to buy vegan chocolate chips. So I'm just gonna use about 2/3 to 3/4 of a cup of chocolate chips, since we're making a little bit smaller recipe. And I'm going to stir those in. So you can see. Okay, and then the recipe also calls for 1 1/4 cups heavy cream and 1 1/2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. Remember, we're having that recipe, so you're just going to, I'm not actually going to measure because I never do, but you would measure when you're doing them for the first time. If you've made them for 13 years in a row, you would be able to do it without measuring yourself. I'm just going to put a little bit of vanilla in there. And then we're just going to stir it together. You want it to come together in a ball, but you don't want it to be a sticky mess. You want it to have just a little bit of flour clinging to the bowl. Now this is still too dry. It hasn't come together as a ball yet, so I'm going to put a little more heavy cream in here. I'm just going to put probably a tablespoon or 2, splash it on. If I were making these vegan, I would use coconut cream, and I'll put a picture of a can of coconut cream in the video so you would know what to buy. And the coconut cream, I would put it in the refrigerator so that the fat, as it floats on top of the liquid, and when it's refrigerated, it gets pretty solid. Okay, so you see how it's come together like a ball, and there's just a little bit of crumbs left in the bottom of the bowl. Might be a little hard to see, but there's just a few crumbs, and when I start to knead this together, those crumbs are going to become a part of the ball. So we're going to stop just when there's a little bit of dry crumbs left in the bottom of the pan, or bowl, I guess. I'm going to move some of this stuff out of the way so we can start forming scones. We're going to need that. I'm going to put on some gloves just because it's kind of a messy affair. You could choose to do so, or just use your hands. Okay, first thing we're going to do is add some flour to our surface. Spread that out. And then I like to kind of knead it in the bowl just a little bit, just to gather up all those little floury bits that were in the bottom of the bowl so that they can become a part of the ball of dough. So you can see how that emptied out the bowl there, just a little bit of floury bits left. Set that off to the side. Okay, then I'm just going to smash it. And then I'm going to roll it like an envelope. One side in, the other side in. Give it a turn. Kind of squeeze it, and we're going to smash it again. Flat. Fold it. Give it a turn. Grab any piece of little chocolate chips that have fallen out, and we're going to smash it one more time. Okay, we're going to roll it like an envelope, or a letter going in an envelope. And now we're going to squeeze it, what I like to call, into an eel shape. And if it starts to stick to your surface, just dust a little more flour. It may be just a little bit sticky, and that's fine. Okay, so now we have it into our nice shape like an eel. And I'm going to press gently with my hand, going up and down our eel until it becomes more flat. You can see that there. Then I'm going to take my, what is it called? Dough scraper. And I'm just going to start flattening it out very gently and keeping the edges nice and square. I'm going to go up and down 2 or 3 times and make sure everything stays nice and square. We don't want it to get too thin. We want it to be pretty even all throughout so that the scones will bake consistently. Okay, I'm just going to pick you up and show you kind of what it looks like here. Okay, it's a nice rectangle, and you can see how thick it is. Looks like it's about 3/8 to 1/2 inch thick. Okay, we got a little bit different angle here. So what we're going to do with our bench scraper is we're going to cut off just the very end, just a very minuscule part. And then we're going to make triangles. So we're going to go up and down, all the while keeping it nice and square. Well, that was a slip. Keeping the edges nice and square. Cutting it in a nice triangle. Trying to make them as even as you can. Not letting the dough get flatter as you go along, not pressing it down too hard. And we have just a little bit left over, which I will probably just make into a little bit smaller scone. Or sometimes what I do, like this guy feels a little lighter than some of the rest. Kind of pick them up and feel kind of how hefty they are. I have a couple that are not quite as big, and I'll show you what I do in that case. I'll take this one that didn't really have enough to make a full scone, and I'll just cut a little bit off, turn this guy over, and then just kind of smash some dough onto the back of it. It won't want to stick very well. You just kind of have to press it in and make sure you maintain the shape of a triangle. We've added to it, and then it still looks very nice and triangular up here. And I'll do it again with some of this other dough. On this first initial piece I cut was really too narrow here, so we'll add some to the top of it, spread it out, smash it on there. Once it's frozen, it's going to stick just fine, and when you bake it you won't be able to tell that it's on the back. Okay, so we've got 2 good size looking scones. Then what we'll do is scrape that clean a little bit. Okay, we've got a 11 by 17 pan here lined with parchment, and we're just going to add the scones to that. Okay, whoops. Okay, so there we have our pan lined with, how many did it make? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It made 7 scones. And then we're just going to cover them up and take them to the freezer. Here we go. Okay, so these will freeze in here overnight, and then I'll bag them up tomorrow. I'll show you what they look like once they're in the bag. And here's our scone freezer, which also has other things in it. But here's some that I made last week. I just put them into a freezer bag. It's a bag of 8 lemon poppy seed scones, and they're frozen individually, so when they get put into the bag, they are not sticking to each other. They freeze completely on the baking tray. Thanks for watching this video on making some scones. We made chocolate chip scones together today. I think you'll find that they're quite delicious. And it's just a little trial and error. When I first started making them about 13 years ago, I was brand new at making scones. I had never made them before. I had made a lot of homemade biscuits, so I was comfortable with using a pastry blender and things like that and baking, but I just was experimenting and using recipes I had found online to try making these scones. So it's been a work in progress as we've gone on, and now I feel like I can make them pretty much with my eyes shut. And I do have help with Sierra, who puts together the big container of mix for us, so it's easy just to scoop that into a bowl and get going without having to worry about measuring out every single ingredient throughout the week. But for home, that's easy to do one batch at a time like you saw us do together. So I hope you try these. If you do and you like them, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel if you haven't done so yet, and we'll see you in the next one. Have a great day.